You want to know what the Galactic Council said when humanity delivered its final warning? They laughed, not a polite chuckle, not a nervous laugh. A full recorded, broadcast across 47 star systems laugh. The kind that echoes, the kind that gets replayed. The kind that 3 months later, nobody in the galaxy wanted to talk about anymore because of what came after it. My name doesn't matter right now. What matters is this. One man, Commander James Rourke, stood in front of the most powerful political body in the known galaxy, and he told them exactly what was going to happen. Word for word. Date for date, and they still didn't believe him. This story is about what happened when they found out he wasn't bluffing. If you're new here, welcome to Monster HFY. Hit that like button right now, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming, and drop a comment telling me, do you think the galaxy deserved what it got? I want to know where you stand before this story is over. Because right now, we're just getting started. Buckle in, this one's going to hit hard. The Conquered of Worlds met every 40 days in the Valeth Orbital Station, a massive ring-shaped structure hanging above a blue gas giant that nobody had ever bothered to name. It was the kind of place built to feel important. High ceilings, long corridors, flags from 93 species hanging in deliberate order, everything designed to make whoever walked in feel small. Commander James Rourke didn't feel small. He walked through the main corridor of Valeth Station with 2 aides behind him and a data chip in his breast pocket. 38 years old. Former warship captain. Now Earth's chief diplomatic envoy, a title that still made some of his old crew laugh, because James Rourke was the least diplomatic person they had ever met. He said what he meant what he said, and he had never once in his career made a threat he wasn't prepared to follow through on. That last part was the most important. The Conquered Chamber seated over 200 delegates. Rourke had been granted exactly 12 minutes of floor time, a deliberate insult, since minor trade disputes were given 30. He didn't complain about it. He had used less time than that to end bar fights on 4 different space stations, so 12 minutes was plenty. He stood at the speaker's podium and waited for the room to settle. Behind the curved row of elevated desks, the delegates of the Valeth Conquered looked down at him the way people look at something they're not quite sure is dangerous or just strange. The Draveth ambassador, tall, gray-skinned, with 6 fingers on each hand and a reputation for political maneuvering that made Earth's Senate look like a school debate, leaned back in his chair with the particular relaxed posture of someone who has already decided the meeting is a waste of time. Rourke set his chip on the podium. A holographic document bloomed into the air above it, 12 pages, formatted in the Conquered's own legal standard, time-stamped and filed with their own registry 36 hours prior. I'll be brief, Rourke said. His voice was calm, not aggressive, not pleading, just clear the way someone sounds when they're reading a weather report they've already memorized. Humanity has been filing formal complaints with this body for 11 years. Disputed territory at the Kedrith margin. Civilian shipping interdictions. The Callaway Station incident, where 412 humans died when a Draveth military vessel opened fire on an unarmed passenger liner, and this council ruled it an unavoidable navigational conflict. He let that sit. For a moment, we are done filing complaints. The Draveth ambassador tilted his head slightly. A few delegates shifted in their seats. This document, Rourke continued, gesturing at the floating pages, is a formal declaration of terms. It is lawful under Article 9 of the Conquered Charter, which your own legal team helped draft. It gives the Draveth hegemony 60 standard days to withdraw military assets from the Kedrith margin, release all detained human vessels, and submit to an independent review of the Callaway incident. These terms are non-negotiable, the deadline is non-negotiable, and the consequences of non-compliance are listed on page 11 in plain language so there is no confusion later. He paused. I want to be very clear about something because this is important. Humanity is not angry. We are not emotional. We are not making this threat because we want war. We are making it because we have done the math, and the math says that if you do not take this seriously today, a very large number of people on both sides are going to die. And that outcome is entirely, 100% avoidable. The Draveth ambassador leaned forward and said something in his own language that the translators rendered as, "How charming." The livestock has opinions, the chamber laughed. Rourke picked up his data chip, slid it back into his pocket, and looked across the room one more time. Page 11, he said quietly. Read it, he walked out. Behind him, the laughter was still going. And somewhere in the back row, a slim gray-blue figure with wide, silver eyes and bioluminescent markings along her jaw watched him leave, and did not laugh. Delegate Sira Voss of the Kithari Neutral Assembly simply watched, her markings shifting slowly from pale blue to a deep, cautious amber. She had read page 11. 3 weeks later, the Dravith hegemony officially rejected humanity's terms and filed a counter-declaration branding the document an act of pre-criminal aggression by a pre-tier species. The 60-day clock kept ticking. Day 41. 19 days before the deadline, James Rourke was aboard the UES Resolute, a heavy command carrier sitting at the edge of the Kedrith margin, when the first intelligence report landed on his desk. The Dravith hadn't withdrawn, they'd reinforced. Rourke read the report twice, set it down, and poured himself a coffee. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Kyle Mercer, stood across the table with the particular expression of a man who had prepared several different bad news briefings and wasn't sure which one to lead with. How many ships? Rourke asked. 87 confirmed, probably 110 when you include the ones hiding behind the Kedrith gas shelf. Mercer pulled up a holographic display. They've also moved 2 garrison divisions onto Kedrith Colony. That's a civilian population of about 60,000 humans who are now, effectively, surrounded. Rourke nodded slowly. They think the hostage move changes our calculus, he said. Doesn't it? No, it means we add a ground operation to the list. He stood, moving to the display. What's the layout of the garrison? Mercer walked him through it. 2 Dravith armored regiments, anti-air emplacements. A command structure that was overconfident in its own fortifications. The kind of setup that looked impenetrable on paper and had exactly 3 exploitable gaps if you knew where to look. Rourke knew where to look. He'd been planning this for 2 years. That was the thing the Dravith and the Conquered and every other species watching from the political sidelines had fundamentally misunderstood about humanity's warning. They had taken it as bluster, an emotional response, a smaller species flexing because it didn't know better, what it actually was, the end of a preparation phase. Humanity had spent 11 years filing complaints and 2 years getting ready. The document Rourke had delivered to the Conquered wasn't a threat, it was a courtesy. A final administrative step before a machine that had been built, tested, and loaded finally started running. On day 58, 2 days before the deadline, the Resolute received a coded transmission from Earth Command. Authorization confirmed. Execute on deadline. Rourke forwarded the authorization to his fleet commanders and then did something that surprised his bridge crew. He requested a communication channel to Valeth Station. The response came back in 4 hours. The Conquered would not grant him floor time. However, they would accept a recorded message. He recorded it. This is Commander James Rourke, UES Resolute, Kedrith Margin. The deadline expires in 48 hours. Withdrawal is still an option. Evacuation corridors for Dravith civilian vessels are still open, coordinates attached. This offer expires with the deadline. Rourke out. He transmitted it to Valeth Station, to the Dravith hegemony's home command, and to every neutral species ambassador with a registered communications address in the Conquered database. Sira Voss of the Kithari Assembly received her copy at 300 her local time. She read it in bed, her bioluminescent markings cycling slowly through colors that, in Kithari body language, indicated something between deep unease and profound respect. She forwarded it to her government with a single line of annotation. They are giving them another chance. This is the 4th such offer in 60 days. The Dravith will not take it. I believe we are about to witness something significant. She was right. The Dravith hegemony's official response arrived 6 hours before the deadline. A 17-page political document accusing humanity of systematic warmongering and demanding that the Conquered impose sanctions on Earth. The Conquered began debating the motion. At exactly midnight on day 60, the debate became irrelevant. The Resolute dropped out of stealth 6,000 kilometers from the lead Dravith battle group, and Commander Rourke opened a fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is Rurk. Authorization is live. Execute plan Irongate. Let's go bring our people home. And then 140 human warships that had been sitting quiet, dark, and invisible inside the Kedrith gas shelf for 18 days, powered up simultaneously. On Dravith fleet sensors, it looked like a star field coming alive. Their comms officer's transmission to Hegemony Command was later recovered and translated. It said simply, "There are so many of them. Where did they all come from?" The Battle of Kedrith Margin lasted 11 hours and 42 minutes. Military historians would later spend decades breaking it down, but the core of it was simple. Humanity had not fought the battle the Dravith expected. The Hegemony had prepared for a frontal engagement, ships against ships, lines against lines, the kind of fleet battle that the galaxy had been running by the same playbook for 300 years. Rurk didn't fight that battle. He fought 4 smaller ones, simultaneously at 4 different points along the margin, splitting the Dravith formation and forcing their commanders to choose which fire to put out first. While 2 human task groups hammered the flanks, a third went straight through the middle at a speed that violated the Dravith tactical assumption that no sane fleet commander would push into a crossfire. And the 4th group, the one the Dravith never found until it was too late, was already at Kedrith Colony. Lieutenant Commander Dana Yates led the ground operation. 22 Marines, 2 medics, and a tactical AI running on a device the size of a deck of cards. They went in through the colony's old mining tunnels, infrastructure the Dravith garrison had marked as structurally unstable and non-viable, because their engineering surveys had been done quickly. And badly. Yates had done her survey 6 months ago in civilian clothes on a tourist visa. The tunnels were fine. In 40 minutes, the garrison's command post was down, the anti-air emplacements were offline, and 60,000 civilians had a route to the colony's emergency shelters. Yates lost 1 Marine, Corporal Steve Haas, 24 years old from Boise, Idaho, to a Dravith sentry patrol that caught them in the 3rd tunnel junction. She recorded his name in her log before the operation was over and transmitted it to Rurk directly. Rurk received it in the middle of managing 3 simultaneous fleet engagements and still stopped for 3 seconds to acknowledge it. "Noted," he said. "Make sure his family is notified before any public release. Nobody hears his name from a news feed." That kind of thing was why his crew would follow him anywhere. Above the colony, the space battle was going badly for the Dravith. Badly in the specific way that happens when a force built for intimidation runs into a force built for war. Hegemony ships were well-armed and visually impressive. Human ships were faster, harder to read on sensors due to a hull coding the Dravith hadn't seen before. And crewed by people who had trained for this exact scenario so many times that most of the engagements felt, to the human crews, almost routine. That was the psychological horror of it for the Dravith. Their enemy wasn't panicking. Their enemy wasn't even particularly excited. They were working. At hour 7, the Dravith fleet commander, Admiral Keth Vara, sent a transmission to Rurk. "You are outnumbered. Surrender and the Hegemony will." "I'm not outnumbered," Rurk said. He pulled up the current fleet map and turned it so Mercer could see it. "Send him the current positions." Mercer transmitted the data. There was a long pause on the other end. "Those numbers are fabricated," Vara said, but his voice had changed. The certainty was gone. "They're live sensor feeds," Rurk said. "Admiral, I'm going to offer you an evacuation corridor one more time. Same coordinates I sent before the deadline. If you move your remaining ships to bearing 270 Mark V, you can withdraw without further engagement. My orders say I have to offer it. I'm offering it." Another pause. "Why? Because your crew didn't make the decision to ignore our warning. Your politicians did, and dead soldiers don't vote." The silence stretched for almost 30 seconds. Then Vara said, "I need 20 minutes to organize withdrawal." "You have 15. Clock starts now." 41 Dravith vessels withdrew. The remaining 31, whose commanders either hadn't received the order or had decided to keep fighting, were disabled and boarded, not destroyed, over the next 3 hours. Rurk was reading the casualty reports when a new transmission arrived. Not from the Dravith, from Valith Station. It was Sira Voss. Her bioluminescent markings were a color he'd never seen on a Kithari face before. A deep, pulsing gold, that the translation note described as the closest Kithari expression to awe. With undertones of shame, "Commander Rourke," she said carefully. "The Conquered has been watching the engagement. There are questions about how you knew, how long you had been preparing, how many ships were actually in the Kedrith Shelf." She paused. "I have been authorized by my government to request a meeting. I'm a little busy right now," Rourke said. "I understand when you are available." Another pause. "Commander, the Dravith told us you were bluffing. Many of us believed them." Rourke looked at the casualty list. "One name, one family, Boise, Idaho." "I know," he said. "Page 11. He closed the channel, and then his sensor officer said, very quietly, "Commander, you're going to want to see this." On the display, 3 new contacts had just appeared at the edge of the system. Not human, not Dravith. Kithari registry codes, but the ship class wasn't anything in their database. They were big, very big, and they weren't moving toward the battle. They were moving toward Valeth Station. Rourke stared at the contacts for exactly 4 seconds. "Get Voss back on comms," he said. She answered in under a minute, and her markings, previously gold, had shifted to a sharp, urgent white. "Those ships are not Kithari military," she said before he could speak. "They are registered to the Kithari Sovereignty Council, a separate political body that my government does not control. Commander, I need you to understand that what they are carrying," the transmission cut, "not interference, deliberate termination from the other end." Rourke turned to Mercer. "What are they carrying?" Mercer was already pulling sensor data. His expression went very still in the way it did when he found something he didn't want to find. "Long-range mass spectrometry says it's hard to be sure at this range, but the energy signature is consistent with a compressed matter weapon. The kind that—" "I know what kind," Rourke said. Compressed matter weapons were banned under Conquered law. Had been for 60 years, following an incident that had turned a moon into debris. They were the galaxy's version of a weapon so terrible that even enemies agreed not to use it. The kind of agreement that held right up until someone decided it didn't apply to them anymore. The 3 Kithari sovereignty ships were heading for Valeth Station, where 212 species delegates were currently in emergency session debating sanctions against Earth. "They're going to blame it on us," Mercer said quietly. Rourke was already moving. "All ships, new priority order. Forget the Dravith cleanup, hold positions and watch them. Every available vessel forms up on the Resolute and we burn for Valeth Station. Maximum thrust. Now, Commander, those 3 ships are bigger than anything we have and we don't know their armament. We'll figure it out on the way." Rourke dropped into the command chair. "Get me a channel to Valeth Station Emergency Services. And someone get me Voss. Any channel, any frequency. I don't care if you have to bounce it off a debris field." The Resolute turned and pushed hard. The frame groaning under acceleration that would have been uncomfortable for anyone not strapped in. Behind it, 37 warships fell into formation. Mercer managed to get a partial channel to Sierra Voss 12 minutes later, unstable, breaking up, clearly being jammed. "Sovereignty Council has been planning this for months," her voice came through in fragments. "They want the station gone. They want it blamed on humans. The Conquered fractures, the Dravith have justification for full war, and the Sovereignty gets static. They told me it was a diplomatic mission. I didn't know." "Commander, I swear I didn't." "Voss," his voice cut through her panic. "Where are you right now?" "I'm on the station." "Good, listen carefully. Get every delegate you can into the station's inner core, the structural spine, lowest 3 levels. That's where the emergency bulkheads are. Move fast and don't explain. If you explain, they'll argue. Just move them." A beat of silence. "You're going to intercept those ships." "I'm going to try. There are 3 of them." "I noticed." "Commander," her voice steadied. The panic pulled back, replaced by something harder and more useful. "The lead ship has a secondary comm array on its dorsal hull port side. The Sovereignty uses a specific encrypted handshake before firing. If you can disrupt that array, you delay the firing sequence by at least 4 minutes. "How do you know that?" "Because I read things I wasn't supposed to read when I realized the delegation wasn't what they told me it was. I've been compiling evidence for 6 weeks. A pause. "I was going to bring it to the Conquered. I didn't move fast enough." "You're moving now," Rourke said. "Send me everything you have on that array." The data package hit his console 30 seconds later. He pulled it up, forwarded it to his weapons officer, and stood. "Mercer, I need a firing solution that takes out that dorsal array without triggering the weapon's failsafe. If we hit the wrong part of that ship, working on it. Work faster." The three sovereignty ships were now visible on long-range optical, massive, dark. Angular in the way of ships built for power rather than speed. Valeth Station glittered behind them, oblivious. The emergency session inside was still debating sanctions against Earth. 212 delegates, staff, journalists, and observers, nearly 4,000 people, going about the work of politics while three ships carrying a weapon that could crack a moon drifted toward them. Rourke opened a direct channel to the lead ship. No response. He opened it again, broadcasting on every standard frequency. "This is Commander James Rourke, United Earth Ship Resolute. You are approaching a civilian station under active Concord protection. Alter your course or we will engage. This is your only warning." The irony of the phrasing was not lost on him. No response. 12 minutes out from the station, the lead sovereignty ship began to rotate, the slow, deliberate motion of a vessel preparing to bring its primary weapon to bear. "Firing solution ready," his weapons officer reported. "Distance, 4,200 kilometers." At that range, precision was possible. But the sovereignty ship was already adjusting. They'd seen the human fleet incoming. They were going to rush the shot. "Take the array," Rourke said. The Resolute fired once, a single, tight-beam kinetic strike at a target the size of a city bus on a ship 3 kilometers long, at 4,200 kilometers, while both vessels were moving. The round hit within a meter of center target. The dorsal array went dark. 4 minutes. "All ships, we have 4 minutes to close the gap," Rourke said. "Push everything you have." The fleet pushed. And the two remaining sovereignty ships began to move, not toward the station, but toward the human fleet. Whatever came next was going to happen fast, and it was going to happen hard. Rourke gripped the arm of his chair and did not look away from the display. The two flanking sovereignty ships were running an intercept pattern, trying to buy the lead ship time to reroute the firing sequence through a backup array. Rourke had expected that. What he hadn't expected was how fast they were. For vessels that size, they moved with a precision that suggested the ships were being run by automated systems, not living crews. "Are there people on those ships?" he asked his sensor officer. A pause. "Life sign readings are minimal. The lead vessel has crew. The two flankers read, mostly automated. Maybe skeleton crews. Unmanned weapons platforms. Deniable. If they were destroyed in the engagement, there'd be no bodies to identify, no crew to capture and question, no evidence trail. The whole thing would look from the outside like a chaotic firefight that somehow ended with Valeth Station destroyed and humanity's fleet in the blast zone. Clean, political, devastating. Rourke made a decision. "Target the flankers' drive cores. Disable, don't destroy. I want them intact enough to pull navigation logs. Execute." The exchange was brief and brutal. The human fleet hit both flankers with concentrated fire at 3 different vectors simultaneously, a tactic called a compression strike, developed specifically to overwhelm point defense systems that could handle 1 or 2 incoming angles but not 6. Both sovereignty ships went dark within 90 seconds. That left the lead vessel. Its backup array was apparently faster than Voss had estimated because at the 2-minute mark, Rourke's sensor officer said, "They're spooling up. Firing sequence is active." 1 minute 50. "Ram it," Rourke said. Mercer turned. "Sir, not the Resolute. Launch one of the unmanned cargo shuttles from Bay 4, set it on a collision course with the barrel of that weapon. If the weapon can't fire without damaging itself, they won't pull the trigger." Mercer blinked, then turned and started working. "That might work. It'll buy us 30 seconds while they figure out how to abort the shuttle without tipping the weapon's barrel into its own housing. 30 seconds, Mercer." "That's all I need." The shuttle launched. The Sovereignty lead ship saw it coming and had exactly the problem Rourke had predicted. Abort and risk the weapon, or hold course and fire with a piece of debris about to enter the barrel housing. Neither option was clean. The firing sequence paused. 30 seconds. The Resolute covered the remaining distance in 28. At point-blank range, human weapons hit every external system on the lead Sovereignty ship simultaneously. Drives, arrays, weapon ports, sensors. The entire outer system envelope of the vessel went dark, not destroyed, paralyzed, silence on the bridge. Then Rourke said, "Get a boarding team together. I want their captain alive, their navigation logs intact, and their weapon made safe by someone who actually knows what they're doing. Patch me through to Earth Command and get me Voss." Voss answered first. Her markings were a color he didn't have a translation for, something between relief and something much older and harder. "The delegates are in the lower core," she said. Her voice was steadier than he expected. "They're safe. Commander, the Conquered is watching the engagement feed live. Every delegate still has their communicator. They've all seen what just happened." "Good," Rourke said, "because I need them to see the next part too." He paused. "How long have you been compiling that evidence package?" "6 weeks. And you were going to bring it to the Conquered on your own." "I was trying to do the right thing through the right channels," she said. There was something almost defensive in her tone, something very familiar. "So were we," Rourke said, "for 11 years," a long silence. "I know," Sira Voss said quietly. "I know." The boarding team found the lead ship's captain 17 minutes later, a Kithari sovereignty official named Dren Hall, who had been, until 6 weeks ago, a registered trade diplomat. He had documentation linking the operation to a coalition of Dravith political interests and Kithari sovereignty hardliners who had decided, independently of either government, that eliminating the Conquered's deliberative body and blaming humanity would solve several problems at once. It was not, in the end, a mystery. It was just greed and fear wearing the mask of politics, the oldest story in any civilization. Rourke read the summary, authorized the arrest warrants, and transmitted the full evidence package to Valith Station with a cover note that said, "Per your ongoing sanctions debate, you may want to read this first." He heard later that the debate stopped mid-sentence when the package arrived. He also heard that Delegate Keth of the Dravith hegemony left the session chamber immediately and did not return. That was the moment, most historians would agree, when the war ended, not with a final shot, but with a file transfer and a silence that spread through the chamber like water finding its level. The Valith Accords were signed 41 days later. The ceremony was smaller than anyone expected. No grand amphitheater, no projected lights across gas giants, no speeches that lasted 3 hours. The Conquered had suggested something grand. Rourke had suggested something honest. They compromised on a mid-sized conference room with good acoustics and a view of the blue gas giant outside. Sira Voss signed for the Kithari Neutral Assembly. Her markings, Rourke noticed, had been a steady, calm blue since the boarding operation. The color, her translator had told him, of someone who has made peace with something they cannot change. The Dravith hegemony sent a new ambassador, a younger official named Brett Voss, who shook Rourke's hand with both of his and looked like a man carrying a weight he hadn't personally put there, but understood he was responsible for carrying anyway. The Kithari Sovereignty Council was dissolved by joint action of 14 member states. Dren Hall and 11 other officials were transferred to a neutral tribunal, one of the Accord's 3 founding demands. The trial was ongoing. The Kedrith margin was returned to free navigation. The detained human vessels were released. An independent review of the Callaway Station incident was opened, and its preliminary findings, that the attack had been deliberate, were made public within the month. One name was added to the Callaway Memorial, Corporal Steve Haas. His family was notified privately before anything else. His mother flew to Valith Station for the signing ceremony and stood in the back of the room in a gray coat, watching the proceedings with the steady expression of someone who had decided that witnessing was enough. Rourke saw her there and nodded once. She nodded back. He didn't give a speech at the signing. He had been asked to and declined. Instead, he sat across the table from Sira Voss while the documents were being finalized, and she said something to him in Kithari, not using the translator, just speaking. Her markings shifted through 4 or 5 colors in quick succession before settling. "What did you say?" he asked. She thought for a moment. "There is no clean translation. The closest is, I misjudged the weight of what you were carrying, and I am sorry for the cost of my mistake." "The cost wasn't yours," Rourke said. "The cost was theirs. The people who thought we were bluffing." She was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Sure, when you walked out of this chamber the first time after delivering the terms, did you know they wouldn't take you seriously? He considered lying. He didn't. Yeah, he said. I knew. Then why bother? Why give them 60 days? Why offer evacuation corridors? Why give the Admiral 15 minutes to withdraw? Why? She stopped, rearranged herself. Why keep offering exits to people who kept choosing not to take them? Rourke looked out at the blue gas giant. Because the door being open doesn't cost us anything, he said. And if even one person walks through it, that's one person who doesn't have to die. That's worth the paperwork. Voss's markings shifted to gold again. That deep, pulsing all with undertones of shame that he'd first seen on a bad transmission in the middle of a battle. Then she said something else in Kithari, and this time she translated it herself, immediately looking directly at him. They called you livestock, she said. They were wrong about everything. But they were most wrong about that. The documents were ready, pens were lifted. History moved forward the way it always does, not with a flash, but with a scratch of ink and the sound of people breathing in a quiet room. And somewhere in the Concord's official record, still logged and time-stamped and filed under pre-conflict documentation, was a 12-page document in standard legal format. Delivered 60 days before the first shot, complete with terms, deadlines, and consequences. Page 11, they should have read it. If this story hit you the way I think it did, drop a comment below. Tell me who was right. Were the 60 days a kindness or a strategy? And share this with someone who needs to hear a story about what happens when you don't take a warning seriously. Subscribe to Monster HFY. We do this every week. See you in the next one.